Deep down inside me, I was an entrepreneur. Didn't even know what that meant. Didn't have role models around me. Wasn't reading books back then, but I was driven to create something for myself.
Personal challenges. What are the things that, like the biggest problems you've had in your life?
Big challenge for me that had to do with a personal dream and a personal goal, and I actually started a business that almost got me fired from my job. It only lasted for about 8 months, but I almost lost my job. I got written up. I had to go. The only way you can ever have the life of your dreams is if you make your decisions not based on what you're feeling, but based on what you're committed to, such that you will work it even when you don't feel like it. Because there'll be more times that you don't feel like it than you do. There's an enormous amount of fear in doing anything for the first time. It's something that is big for you and you've never done before. But you have to have a personal strategy, a mental strategy, to be able to step into that fear, to be able to break through to the next level, and no matter what it is.
Hello everyone, join us for another episode of The Overcomers. Today we're going to highlight the story of one of the most special people I've met virtually in my life. His name is Jordan, and as you know, I am relational, not transactional, and Jordan is just like a perfect example of somebody who shares my belief systems and my ideology and philosophy about business and the meaning of life and just relationships over transactions. So I wanted to share with you a little bit of information about Jordan. He's a very interesting guest. We're going to learn a lot today. He's full of wisdom. His well is full. So please pay attention to the things he's going to share with you guys. He's going to offer a lot of solutions for you, and he's going to confirm a lot of your assumptions about what's the most important part in life and what is the meaning of life and how do we find our purpose. The reason why I say this is because Jordan has enormous experience with life. At 34 years old, he was living in closed garage. His rent was $200 a month, and he had 2 roommates. He carried $36,000 in credit card debt, and his job paid him only $14,000 a year. So he had tried 11 network marketing companies in 10 years and never signed up one person and never made one penny. So the future looked bleak. Yet today, he's one of the highest paid network marketers in the world as the #1 affiliate with the legacy company Sendout Cards. He has earned tens of millions of dollars getting people set up on Sendout Card system. He cracked the code. His best-selling book, Beach Money, has sold over 1 million copies, and 100% of the profits of his book are donated to an organization that helps entrepreneurs developing countries start small businesses through microloans. He recently published a second book, Better Than Beach Money. Jordan also founded Momentum Makers. It's a book and also a series of events with his business partner and publisher Tony Ferraro. Their mission together is to create opportunities for emerging leaders to get published and speak on stages that will allow them to bring opportunity and credibility to the profession and instill belief in the network marketing model as a way to create a legitimate residual income and just perfect beach lifestyle of growth and freedom without having to invest a lot of money and hire a bunch of employees. So they focus on working smart, not working only hard. He has been featured in over 100 books and has been a guest on over 300 podcasts. He has spoken on stages with Richard Branson, Tony Robbins, Pitbull, and Eric Warr. Jordan splits his time between 2 mountain homes, a condo on the Vegas Strip, and of course the beach. 6 years ago, he decided to get his helicopter pilot's license for fun. Jordan's message is a message of hope, simplicity, and limitless opportunity. Jordan's believes that when you continue to send good things out in the world and treat people right, good things will come your way. So he follows the simple law, the #1 law in life. Do to people what you want for yourself. With no further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Jordan Adler, Beach Money. Hello, Jordan.
Wow, thanks, Milko. Nice to see you.
Pleasure to see you. Pleasure to see you. I've been wanting to get you on my podcast for a very, very long time. As you know, I am a huge fan of Sendout Cards. It's a basically dream come true for me. As a sales professional, I used to send birthday cards to all of my clients, and it's enormous return on investment. So I was super busy as a top producer, and I had to to kind of delegate this to my dad, who was retired at the time, he still is, and it was pretty costly process because I wanted to make sure people feel special when they receive a birthday card. So I would buy individual cards and that kind of fit with their personality and try to have individual message and collecting the address. So it was, the cost per card came up to almost $3-4. And besides that, I wanted to pay my dad a little bit of money for doing it. So when I found out about send out cards, I was like, wow. First of all, this is personalization on a whole different level. And second, it's way, way cheaper to do it this way. Plus, you don't have to be part of the whole execution and the production of the card and just the processing. So genius product. As similar to you, I've been a part of every MLM out there, and I also didn't get too much success with those. I mean, if you don't get involved early on, the chances are very slim. But enough about me. Let's focus on you. Would you please share a little bit of history? Let's go way back. Tell us about your parents. We want to know about your mom and dad, and also about their parents. That's how we usually start.
Yeah. Before we go there, too, I mean, you're being in the car business. Joe Girard. You know Joe Girard, correct?
Oh yeah.
So Joe Girard wrote a book called How to Sell Anything to Anyone, and if you read his book, you'll learn that this was long before technology. He was handwriting his cards. Every single person he met, didn't matter if you bought a car from him or not, he would handwrite a personalized card. But he didn't just send you one; he'd send you a card every single month for as long as he knew you. So when you were ready to buy a car, or if you wanted to sell a car, first person you would think of is Joe, because Joe, you trusted Joe. Joe cared about you. Joe remembered your name, all that kind of stuff. And he became the #1 salesman in the world. And to this day, he still holds the record. He's in the Guinness Book of World Records 12 years in a row for selling more cars than, not just holds the record in car sales, but in sales. Like his sales numbers are off the charts. So, but my background, you asked me about my background. I grew up in the south suburbs of Chicago. My only exposure to entrepreneurship was my grandfather, who I got to know. He was in my life until he passed away when I was 18. And my grandfather was an inventor. He invented the touch-up paints for cars. And he actually had the patent on that. He sold it for $20,000 because he needed money. That patent ended up becoming worth millions and millions and millions of dollars. But he sold it when it was worth about $20,000. And he served in World War I and World War II. My grandmother never came out of the house. She was hermit. She never came out of the apartment in Chicago.
For your dad's parents?
My father's father. But he was an entrepreneur, and I can't tell you that I was inspired by him as an entrepreneur, because I really didn't even know what that was back then. But my dad had a job all of his life. He was a salesman, but he had a job all his life. He sold advertising. He was management at shopping malls as well. That's what my father did. And my father, his advice to me was always very traditional. You got to get a good job. He hated the fact that I was involved in network marketing for the first 20 years. He's like, Jordan, you just got to get a real job and just work hard and go to college and all that kind of stuff. And I did that, but deep down inside me, I was an entrepreneur. Didn't even know what that meant. Didn't have role models around me. Wasn't reading books back then. But I was driven to create something for myself. And so I did the lemonade stand, and I did, a paper route, and tried to figure out ways to increase my tips by treating people right. My mom, she spent the most of her life raising us, myself and my two sisters. And then also she started recruiting people for United Blood Services. And she would ask people if they would donate blood. And she had many articles written about her, but she was a recruiter in that sense. And she was looking for people to donate blood, which is a pretty tough sale. And she had thousands of people. She had little index cards that she would follow up with on a regular basis to get them to come in and donate blood. And she saved probably tens of thousands of lives over the years through that effort. And then on my mother's side, my grandfather on that side, I don't even know what he did for a living. They had a little home in Peoria, Illinois, and I'd go visit. And down the street, little funny story, down the street, my grandmother, who was probably in her 60s at the time, said, "There's a boy down the street that plays." I had just picked up a guitar for the first time, and I was 7 years old, and I didn't know how to play guitar, but I had a guitar and I wanted to learn. He goes, "There's a boy down the street that plays guitar. You should walk down there and meet him." And I'm like, I was a little embarrassed and a little nervous, and I never went. It turned out it was Dan Fogelberg. You might not even know who he is. Dan Fogelberg he died very young, but he died of cancer very young, but he was a very, very famous singer-songwriter. He would do a concert and 30,000 people would show up. He had many best-selling hits, but at that point he was just a kid, and I never met him, but I ended up going to his concerts many years later. So that was my family. I've got two sisters. We grew up in the south suburbs of Chicago. My dad made $28,000 a year at his peak. And ironically, after 17 years working a job myself, the most I ever made in a job in my life was $28,000, which was the same as what my father made at his peak. And that's because I carried the philosophies and the beliefs and the values of my father. So I was moving towards the same life because I was making the same kinds of decisions. But I was always dabbling in little entrepreneurial things. And over the course of 10 years, as you mentioned in the intro, I got involved in 11 different network marketing companies and never recruited one person, never signed up a single person, never made a penny. And the thing that inspired me about the industry was I picked up a book at a garage sale. The book was 25 cents, changed my life, called The Basics. The 10 Napkin Presentations by Don Faila. And this book taught me the concept of residual income and leverage, those two concepts that I'd never heard before and never been taught before. But it got me excited about the idea of working one time and getting paid hundreds of times. And I realized that there are many, many opportunities out there where you can work once and get paid hundreds of times. And I decided in my 20s that no matter how long it took, I was going to align myself with a financial vehicle or multiple financial vehicles that pay me multiple times for working one time. Because I focused on that for so many years, eventually I got to the point where I had a residual income and I was able to have the lifestyle freedom that most people don't ever get. Not when I say most people, nobody ever gets lifestyle freedom when they have a job. And in traditional business, the bigger you get, the less freedom you have. As you hire more employees, open up more locations, you have less and less freedom. Whereas in network marketing, the more successful you become, more freedom you have. And I like that about the model. If you can put in 5 hours a week and you can find one other person that can put in 5 hours a week, you're now benefiting from 10 hours worth of work a week, but you're only putting in 5. And then if you leverage yourself through the work of other people over time, you can have an army of people out there working and you're getting a cut of everything they do, which ultimately can give you the freedom to be able to travel the world, live life on your terms, expand your income to a level that will really meet your dreams rather than trying to shrink your dreams down to meet the level of your income, which is what most people do.
What do you think made the difference? Because you didn't sell anything, not because you probably enjoyed the meetings a lot. They have the free meetings that they were motivational.
I did enjoy those.
You were eating the dream and the vision.
Gave me hope.
Yeah. But why do you think you didn't sell anything?
It had to do with two things. One, it had to do with my belief in myself. My confidence level was such that if things got tough, I would quit. Things got really tough, I would decide that it wasn't for me. There was something about it that wasn't going to work for me. And that was just not the case. That wasn't the truth. That's just what I believed. So I'd get 2 or 3 or 4 rejections and then I would just throw in the towel. Some of them were setbacks that were justified. You could completely justify quitting. But what I found out is that people that make it in business, their setbacks don't set them back. Their setbacks are maybe just temporary. They're temporary. And it's about entrepreneurism as being about being resourceful, solving problems. So I made a decision in my 30s after reading many personal development books and going to all those seminars you talked about, trying lots of different things. I made a decision when I was in my 30s that I'm not going to quit on a bad day. And I'm also going to see the job through no matter what. If things got tough, I was going to figure it out and stick around, even though it hurt, it stung. I was going to stick around until I figured out the solution. And my 12th company, the one that set me free, that company, I had 2 setbacks in my first year that I would have been completely justified in quitting, and I didn't. And on my 11th month in that 12th company, on my 11th month, I made $180. The first 10 months, I didn't make a penny, but I finally got my first check in my 11th month. It was $180, and I went on to make millions and millions of dollars with that company. But I had 2 setbacks that I remember thinking, this is it, I can't do this. But I decided, because I was just so done with quitting, that I was just going to keep going back, keep doing it. And sure enough, my 16th recruit was a lady named Jackie Ulmer. She lived in Arizona. Jackie was a yield analyst at the airline that I worked for. Her husband was an airline pilot. She was very skeptical at first. Then they got excited about it. They opened up their mind to it. And they ended up introducing me to a woman in New Mexico named Judy Dubiel. Judy was a secretary and a student. Judy started inviting people into her home. And over the next 3 years, she brought in not very many people, 20 people, but that group led to 12,000 distributors and 40,000 customers and made me my first $1 million. That was in my 12th company. On my 33rd month, Jackie's organization exploded because I didn't quit. Now, I could have easily quit many months before that and never found Jackie. So I was with that company for 13 years. I recruited 129 people in 13 years, which is less than one a month, less than one person per month. If that was a job, I would lose my job. to recruit only one person a month. But I recruited one person a month for 13 years. And from those 129 people, 5 of them, just 5 out of 129, went out and built a group of 85,000 distributors and 250,000 customers and made me millions and millions of dollars. That was because I just kept consistently 3 or 4 days a week. I was sharing my opportunity with people over lunch typically.
Yeah.
So I figured out how to meet people, how to set an appointment, how to give a presentation, and how to follow up.
What company is it? What were you selling?
That was Excel Telecom. Do you remember Excel? You might be a little young. Excel went out of business in 2004, but they were 16 years old. It was a $1.5 billion company that went out of business. But they were 16 years old, and I joined them on their fourth year, and they were a telecom network marketing company. And if you think about this, we got paid on long distance phone service. And back then it was 30 to 40 cents a minute. And we got paid on that. That's how we got paid. Well, long distance went to zero. The whole industry went digital. And we were an analog company. And so it would be like if me and you had a record player company and somebody came out with the MP3, we'd be out of business. That's what happened. Our company went out of business, and $1.5 billion company went out of business in 6 months.
It failed to adapt.
It wasn't even possible for us to adapt because of our technology, what we owned. We owned hundreds of millions of dollars of old technology that became outdated.
Well, that's what they're facing right now, like AT&T and all these big companies. They have so much old technology. With this
I don't even know how those companies stay in business. They're trying.
They hire small brokers and they give them access to data. They call businesses because they can't handle the amount of businesses they have. And they call businesses and they say, look, if you don't change your phone system in the next 3 months, they're going to increase the bill like 900%. They're switching to VPS or whatever. Tell me, first of all, what is your first conscious moment? When did you realize you were a human being? What is your first memory from being alive?
You know what? It's funny because I remember I was probably 4 years old or 3 or 5. I'm probably in the range of between 3 and 4. I was in my playpen, and I can remember putting my hands on the rail of the playpen, and I even remember the color and the taste because I put my mouth on the rim of that thing. But I remember my mom picking me up out of the playpen. But that's my first memory. And then I remember playing with my father on the carpet of our little tiny home in Niles, Illinois. And we had those. It's funny because I was in the telephone business, and I don't know if you remember where you put a cup on your ear and it would be attached with a string on another cup. And I remember with my father having that, we'd talk in it, and that was like a telephone that we'd make. And I remember doing that in front of the black and white TV that had tubes in it. The TV had tubes in it. And when you turn the TV on, it had to warm up before the picture would come on.
Yeah, we've came a long way since.
Yes, we have. It's amazing in one lifetime how far we've come, in technology. It's crazy. Yeah.
Tell me, what are your biggest personal challenges? What are the things that, like, the biggest problems you've had in your life that you had
in my life? The biggest challenge I had was, it's interesting because it's very niche. I became a helicopter pilot, as you mentioned in my intro, about 8 years ago. And it was the hardest thing I ever learned to do. And I decided to buy a helicopter after 3 years of flying. And so there was a particular helicopter that I wanted, but there aren't very many of them in the United States. And so I hired a broker, and I started traveling around the country looking at these helicopters. And then I had to hire somebody to give an inspection, to do the pre-buy inspection and all that. This particular helicopter that I found was in the swamps of Louisiana in a hangar, and it had been maintained by the same guy, David Snow, for 11 years. And I decided that's the helicopter I wanted. So took it apart, shipped it across the country, had to hire people to put it back together. I had to put radios in it and some special FAA certified seats. And I did all this work on this thing. Finally, and I started going down to Texas to get training. So I went to Texas 5 times to get training on this particular piece of equipment. Finally, I soloed 6 months after I bought it and got it all set up and everything. I finally soloed in it for the first time. I went up by myself in the helicopter for the first time. And then I met a guy who was introduced to me. And this guy said he was a commercial helicopter pilot. Make a long story short, got to know the guy, went to go flying one day. I'd only flown in my helicopter once, and it has dual controls, and everyone knew him as a commercial pilot. So everyone knew this guy as a commercial pilot, and we got in the helicopter, and we were hovering over the ramp, right where the fuel tanks were and the parking lot. We were hovering right there, and I turned the controls over to him, and within a quarter second, the helicopter flipped back, tail spun around, and when it hit a 150-gallon fuel tank while we were in the helicopter in the air. And the helicopter shattered into a million pieces. And if you read the accident reports, anytime your main rotor hits something while you're in the air, you die. Everybody dies. And the helicopter shatters. Well, we stepped out of the wreckage. Long story short, he took off. The FAA did an investigation. They found out he'd never flown a helicopter in his life. and he was not a licensed pilot. And I turned my controls over to him while we were in the air. I'd known him for months. Everyone that knew him, the pilots, the mechanics, he had been lying to his girlfriend, his mother, for many, many years. Everyone thought he was a licensed helicopter pilot and that he owned helicopters and that he flew every week. So the bottom line is, this was my dream. This was a big dream for me. My helicopter was destroyed, cost me about $250,000 out of pocket after insurance. I was shattered, and then also I lived through it. We shouldn't have lived. If you saw the wreckage, there's no way we could have lived through that. And there was no explosion. There should have been a spark. My helicopter was completely shattered into a million pieces. The biggest challenge for me in my life was getting back in the helicopter and flying again after that crash. Wow. And I actually 4 months later, I went up with an instructor. I did all the work. I was fine ever since then. I've probably flown 50, 60 times since then. That was a big challenge for me that had to do with a personal dream and a personal goal. And then, things like losing your parents, and they're just the stuff that we all go through. It's just, your business doesn't stop when your life has tragedy and crisis, because it always does. We're always experiencing tragedy and crisis. That's just the condition of being human. You have to carry a philosophy. I mean, you obviously need to mourn the loss of your loved ones. You've got to handle problems and issues that come up in your life. But at the same time, there's people, when you have a business, there's people that depend on you. And a lot of people, what they do is they have a little challenge or crisis and they stop doing what they're doing for 6 months, and then they wonder why they're not successful. The only way you can ever have the life of your dreams is if you make your decisions not based on what you're feeling, but based on what you're committed to. It's like you got kids, and you got kids, and you have a big issue that happens in your life. You don't stop being a parent to your kids because of this issue over here. You're still a parent because you're committed. You may not feel like it in the moment, but you've got a commitment to those children. So it's the same with your business. You've got to make a commitment to your business that make it a high priority. It doesn't have to be number one, but it needs to be a high priority such that you will work it even when you don't feel like it, because there'll be more times that you don't feel like it than you do. Am I right?
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, never giving up is one of the things that it's critical, because eventually just the, surviving the deception period is rewarding when you move into picking up some of the fruits, especially with what you've been doing with passive residual income. Eventually something is going to work out, and that's what it happened.
And something's not going to work out.
Both, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So tell me about the teenage years. What are some trends you were into?
So when I was a teenager, I was doing bongs in the forest with my friends, marijuana. And I would never have admitted that 10, 15 years ago, because we wouldn't talk about that stuff. But back then, that's what I was doing. And I was a gymnast. I was a high school and college gymnast. So I was used to training, and I was used to working hard, and I was used to getting back up when I fall down. I broke my nose 3 times they call it ripping off the bar. Wow. So what that means when you rip off a bar is you're on a high bar and you're doing giants, which is like you're going like this. And there's certain tricks that where you lose your grip. I lost my grip many times, but 3 different times I lost my grip, and you fly through the air sometimes. If you're not in a spotting belt, or, if you don't have some mattresses or cushion, or what do they call those, mats, right? You rip off the bar, and I slammed my face into some tar barrels in the gym a couple times. Broke my nose, hit my knee on my nose one time. But I learned, I took the hits, and it was a very brutal sport as far as injuries go, but I kept going back, and I was a high school and a college gymnast. So I was doing that, doing bongs in the woods with my friends, doing things that my parents, if they had known, they would not have approved of. I did get a motorcycle when I was 17 years old. So right after I got my driver's license, I got a motorcycle. My parents were terrified about that, but it helped me pick up the girls. I had a little motorcycle, but I also played guitar and sang. So
nice.
In fact, my friend, this is again probably. Do you know who Simon and Garfunkel are, Velko?
Oh yeah, I've listened.
Okay. So Simon and Garfunkel, very famous. So the guy this kid that was one of my closest friends growing up, we learned when we were kids. We learned the entire Simon and Garfunkel Greatest Hits album. We'd sit by the record player with our guitars, and we would take that needle and move it on the record back and forth until we'd learn all the riffs, and then we learned the harmonies, and we used to sing all that, and we'd sing it in the stairwells. The girls would come in the stairwells and we'd sing in there. And, that was fun. And he decided he wanted to become a professional. He ended up going to Nashville, and he ended up going on tour with Art Garfunkel, brought Art out of retirement. He brought Art out when Simon and Garfunkel split up. Many years later, Buddy got with Art, and they went on a world tour with an orchestra. And he's played with he wrote many songs for Garth Brooks, and he's been on Garth's albums, and he's played concerts with Garth. And Buddy was my best friend growing up. We played for 10 years. We played guitar and sang together.
That's awesome.
So that's what I was doing in high school. And I had a paper route.
Tell me what happened from 21 to now.
Well, it was at that point I was on my entrepreneurial journey. That's when I was started to get involved in these different companies. I was involved in Nashika 3D cameras. That cost $300 to get in. I racked up $36,000 in credit card debt on 22 credit cards, getting in and out of network marketing companies. I actually had a job all during that time. I started off, I've got a degree in landscape architecture, and I worked that for 3 years as a draftsman. Didn't pay much money. It paid very little, just over $10,000 a year. And I was drafting for architectural firms. And then there was an airline starting up in Arizona that had one plane, one jet. And we grew to over 100 jets, 737s, 747s, Dash 8s. And I was with that airline. I started with them in my 20s. I was with the airline for over 10 years. We grew to thousands and thousands of employees. But again, the most I ever made at that job was $28,000. And then when the airline filed bankruptcy, they cut my pay down to $14,000 a year. So from my 20s into my early 30s, I was working for an airline doing in the training department, mostly reservations training, flight attendant, emergency equipment training, emergency procedures training. But we were all kids, everybody in this airline. We were in our 20s and 30s, and we were building this airline.
Wow.
It was very entrepreneurial, but not very good paying. We had stock options that became worthless because the airline filed bankruptcy. But that was an entrepreneurial exposure that really taught me many lessons about entrepreneurship. And I got to know the CEO and the founder of that airline very well, and his family, because we were very small. We were 180 people, and then we grew to 15,000 people. And then while I was in the airline, I was doing a lot of entrepreneurial startup things. I actually started a business that almost got me fired from my job. Because I was in the training department, I realized that there are thousands and thousands and thousands of women that want to become flight attendants. And it sounds really glamorous, right? And so I decided, I was one of the interviewers for flight attendants at the airline. So at one point I was actually on the board that would decide who got in and who didn't. And I decided to start a business to teach people, because they were horrible. Like half of them, these women were, and not just women, but men too, were horrible at the process. Like they didn't know how to get a job. I didn't know how to write a resume. They didn't know what to say in the interview, all that. So I wrote a program to teach women and men how to get jobs as flight attendants. And I started teaching them. Well, I was also the recruiter at the airline. So little bit of a conflict of interest. I would charge $30 and they could come to my 4-hour course, And I sold, I'd sell 20 tickets, and it only lasted for about 8 months, but I almost lost my job. I got written up. I had to close my business down. So
it was good though. You got frustrated, but you've got so much more potential. Only if you knew. Come on, it's an obvious question.
Because there's we'd have a table, and it was a draped table, so it had draped down the front of it, so nobody could see our feet. And there'd be people that would be interviewing in these interviews, and the woman next to me, who's part of the panel with me, would be kicking me under the table, like, because of the answers of these women. Like, it was crazy, some of the stuff they would say in an interview. It's like, are you kidding me?
So if you go back to your life, your experience with life, if you could go to any moment in your past and you get an opportunity to relive that moment, whether you just want to be an observer of the same situation or change the outcome, make a different decision, whether that's a positive or negative moment in your life, what moment would you go back to?
You ask really good questions. That one takes some thought. A moment in my life. Done a lot in my life. I mean, there's many defining moments that I would love to relive. Like a lot of first experiences. The first time I was in the jungle, but these weren't learning experiences so much. Just things where you have a dream for so many years and it's something you want to do, and then you get to experience that for the first time. So soloing in the helicopter was a big thing. Like that day was one of the scariest days of my life, but also one of the most rewarding days of my life.
You visualized it thousands of times.
For so many years, for so long. The other one is I was a hang glider pilot for 8 years. I learned a hang glider. You ever seen those things? They look like big kites, and you have a harness and you get in them, and you got a little parachute on you, and you run off mountains. And I did that for 8 years every weekend in Colorado, Arizona, and Mexico, mostly, a little bit in California. And the first time I flew off of a mountain, the very first time by myself, that was an exciting day. Wow. And I did learn some things from that. I mean, the training was about 6 months, And you learn the basics. You learn takeoffs and landings and turns, and you learn the basics about microclimate and wind and all that, and the landing zones and setups and all that. The biggest lesson I learned was that there's an enormous amount of fear in doing anything for the first time.
Yeah.
Especially if it's something that is big for you and you've never done it before. There's an enormous amount of fear that comes with that. And you have to have a personal strategy. And for everybody, it's different. But you have to have a personal strategy. It's a mental strategy to be able to step into that fear, to be able to break through to the next level, and no matter what it is. So when I was running off the mountain for the first time, the fear was gripping, and it would be really easy to not go. And if you hesitate, just like in business, if you hesitate, you die.
Yeah.
You can't half-ass run off the mountain because you crash. You have to run off at full force, and everything needs to be perfectly aligned. The wind needs to be blowing directly into your face. You know what I'm talking about. Do it in certain tricks.
In skateboarding, this is called the dip. So if you go on the ramp and you put the skateboard in the air, and if you don't do it with confidence, you're going to fall on your ass. It's like guaranteed.
You can't fall on your... See, the hang gliding is unforgiving. Like it's not... It's a matter of life or death. You know, when you screw up, you can't screw up. If you screw up in a hang glider, the likelihood you're going to die is very high. So you have to have confidence in what you do. And sometimes you don't have the practice yet. You have enough practice to get you on the launch, but you can't train for everything. So you have to lean on the fundamentals. And what I used to do for the first 50 times I ran off the mountain is I would disconnect my brain from my body for a few seconds, just long enough to move through the air to get the helicopter off the ground.
How do you do the command? How do you do that for viewers so they could implement it if they can?
It's not even a how-to conversation. It's a mindset. It's like if you've ever seen the fire walk, the Tony Robbins fire walk, right? It's like, how do you do that? Well, you get into state, you breathe, and you take action. You know, that's how it is with the fire walk. You got to get into state when you're getting ready to run off the mountain. You got to breathe and you got to take action. And that's taking the steps and just having faith in your training.
Do you feel like those moments made you grow as a human and as a businessman?
Exponentially, yes.
So
it's those moments that you stretch to a new level that you have the greatest growth.
Yeah. You know, I don't know. Are you a believer? Do you?
Absolutely.
What do you believe in?
It's all about faith. I believe in God.
So they say that the devil knows what our gift is, sometimes better than we do, because we struggle with self-sabotage. Even you started your story with just having a limited mindset adopted from our earthly fathers. So the devil knows what our biggest gift is, and he will attack that with shame and guilt and fear. Yeah. But if we go and do it anyways, then he becomes powerless, and that's why we become greater and greater. So for those of you that are watching, whatever you're most afraid of, it's probably what you're greatest at.
That's really great. Yeah.
He knows, and that's why he's trying to prevent us from shining, from being great, because everyone is capable of greatness. But it's stepping into that fear, which it takes courage, but it does take some life hacks. It's like mind hacks, like you had, disconnecting the mind from the body. I mean, that's one
strategy. There's lots of different ways of dealing with fear. That's one. You know, it is leaning on your faith, and then, you know, looking up versus looking down. Right? Think about that. It's like such a great metaphor.
Yeah. Another thing that I was thinking about as you were saying that, like, you can't hesitate. There's a story in the Bible where Jesus is in the water, and Peter and the other guys are in the boat, and they were doubting that because Jesus looked like a spirit. So Peter said, if you are God, then I want to do what you do. I want to come into the water. And he did. He stepped on the water. A human was doing what only God can do. But it says a little bit later down the chapter that he doubted, you know, and he dipped in the water because he started to have doubt. So
have you read Donna Johnson's book? Donna Johnson's the #1. She'd be a great guest on your show. Donna Johnson's the #1 earner in Arbonne. She's been with them for over 30 years. And she wrote a book called My Mentor Walks on Water. Have you read that?
No, not yet.
And that she opens the book with that story.
Yeah. And he doubted it. And that's one of the things that if you go, with your godly purpose, or if you go in business or in anything, if you step into the water, you're going to perish if you take 1 second of distraction or doubt or just lack of faith. You will perish. And I'm so glad that you're sharing those moments, because we have to just dive in, and that's what creates the level up, going on the next stair.
No doubt. Yeah.
So what do you, I'm going to switch gears with you a little bit. What are you tolerating right now? Because you have a high standard for your life, and you know that there is something that's standing between you and your full potential. And what is one thing that you recognize right now?
Oh, I know what. It's real estate.
Like that you're tolerating. You know you're stronger than this. You know that it doesn't control you, but for some reason it's just slowing you down.
Eric Worre calls it the success coma. And everybody gets it at some point. Even people that have jobs that they've worked their job for 20 years and they're used to a certain way of living, and maybe they're not living the life of their dreams, but they're just used to a certain way of living, and you get complacent. And I've got a magnificent life. I've got full-time freedom. I travel the world and enjoy my life, like really enjoy it. And I've got a level of a success coma going on, meaning that some days it's hard to be motivated because I don't need to work.
Yeah.
It's not just that. I mean, you can get that. You can be making $20,000 a year at your job and have a success coma.
Right. All the experiences that maybe you're missing out on, being distracted by something. And sometimes it's in a blind spot. You know, we don't sometimes, like I realized yesterday, I want to schedule an epic adventure monthly, you know, not once a year, but like something huge every month.
Yeah. And I've actually had that as a goal, and I do that now. Like I do that now. I'm so aware of the success coma that I'm very driven, but I also am aware of the success coma. There's days that I wake up that it's like, I just want to sit on my deck and look out over Sedona, you know?
You think that's what it is?
There's days that I just don't want to do anything, but then I'm also aware of that. There's so much more to experience. And then also just the lives, like I get a lot of juice in life out of seeing other people achieve their dreams. You know, I'm a dream broker. Just like you, when you mentioned doing one of those epic experiences every month, mine started with, I want to be able to take a vacation once a month. That's where it started many years ago. I want to be able to take a vacation. Then it got to the point where it's like, I want to give other people the experience of something that they've never experienced before that will expand their dreams to a whole new level. So that's why I got my helicopter license, because I wanted to be able to take my friends up in the helicopter and let them see a world that they've never seen before. So I've probably taken up 150 people that have never flown in a helicopter before.
Well, when you come back to Chicago one day, you know, Chicago's been asking about you.
Yeah. I love Chicago. Well, that's, I love Chicago. I lived in Chicago. Well, I grew up there in the suburbs, but then I lived there for 4 years in the city.
I'll give you an architecture tour of all the new buildings.
Yeah. You give me a tour, or I give you a tour?
Well, you'll be flying unless you want to, release the control, unless you want to repeat the same.
That's not going to happen anymore.
Because we might have the same results if I'm flying.
Yeah. You know, people think that it's easy to hover a helicopter. It takes hours and hours and hours to be able to hold a helicopter in one spot over the ground. Just to be able to do that, you have to, like my instructor saved my butt 100 times. Every time you try and hover, the helicopter goes out of control and your instructor saves you every time until you get it.
Flying is difficult, and it's only for people who have realized that proactive is the way to go. Like people who are not into preparation, it's dangerous for them to,
Yeah.
So it's for mature people. You know, maturity doesn't come with age, but it comes with the realization, hey, preparation is what gives me a chance of having a little bit of nicer life.
Living.
Exactly. Because when you react to life, you're like, whoa, what happened? So I wanted to ask you another interesting question.
Okay.
So we didn't conclude what are you tolerating right now? Something that you know it's sitting like in front of you and you can smash it, but you've been just procrastinating on removing it from your life.
Well, here, like I'll give you an example. So I used to climb a mountain in Phoenix called Squaw Peak. It's now called Piestewa Peak. And it's about, if you're in great shape, it's 30 minutes to the top. But most people, it takes them an hour to an hour and a half to get to the top of the mountain. It's the highest peak in Phoenix. And I used to do that 2, 3, 4 times a week. Even in the summer when it was 115 degrees, I would go up on that mountain. And I remember just the feeling of putting one foot in front of the other, even if it hurt, to get to the top of that mountain. But the reason I did it, obviously it helped keep me in great shape, but I did it because it was conquering a challenge. You know, I enjoyed the challenge of it, and I enjoyed increasing my speed. So as far as business goes, like what I did just recently, like in the past year and a half, is I decided to make some radical shifts in the direction of my business that would help me to intentionally connect with more people at a higher level, people that have way more going on than I have going on, so that I could be around them and learn from them. And so I made some moves, some big moves. And I broke into another world of my network that I wasn't connected to at all. It's exploding. It's the online marketing world, the business coach world, where there's some really extraordinary people in there that I didn't know. And so I decided to go on retreats and go on marketing cruises and sign up for coaching programs and just immersing myself. And I did this intentionally because I found myself in the success coma. So I wanted to step out of that. So I decided to make some moves. So in my book, I talk about the story of a hummingbird. I'm in an old ghost town. I have a home here for 25 years. It's a bustling tourist town now, about 500 residents, but we have 2 million people a year come through this town. I'm on the third story of a 4-story home. My home is small. It's not big, but it's 4 stories, and it's on the side of the mountain right up in town. So I'm on the 3rd level, and right in front of me, I'm looking at it here, is a door. It's on the 3rd story deck. And that door was open, and a hummingbird flew in. And that hummingbird flew right over to this big picture window behind me here. And I was getting ready to leave for 2 weeks. And the hummingbird's trying to fly out that window. And I'm trying to get and they're very fast. You can't catch a hummingbird. I'm trying to get the hummingbird to go to the door. It's right here. It's like 10, 15 feet away. And I couldn't get the hummingbird to focus towards the door. He wanted to go through that window. And the more I tried to get him to go towards the door, the more frustrated he was getting. I was getting frustrated. It took me an hour and a half, and he still wouldn't go to the door. And I knew that if I left, he would die on that windowsill. He'd be dead when I got back. He'd be dead on the floor or on the windowsill. And finally, he got tired, and I got him with a pitcher, and I let him out, and he flew off. But my point is this. That little hummingbird, he doesn't need to learn how to fly better. He knows how to fly perfectly. He didn't need a flying coach. He just needed to focus in a different direction. And if he would have turned his 180 degrees and focused in a different direction, he could have effortlessly flown to freedom. One direction leads to struggle and death, and other leads to freedom, and it's effortless. And it all had to do with what he chose to focus on. He chose to focus over there. If he had chose to focus over here, he could have flown to freedom. And we do that in our lives, and I'm very aware of that. Like, I'm very, very aware that when I'm frustrated and I'm struggling and I'm feeling anxiety, I'm feeling fear, it's because of what I'm focusing on. And so I made a conscious decision a year and a half ago, because I was living a success coma. I was just coasting and having a good life, but I decided I wanted to take it to a new level. And so I decided I'm going to shift my focus completely, 180 degrees. And by doing that, I've opened up new worlds, like new worlds of communities, of people. And it's always, if you think about it, every great thing that's ever happened in our lives happened as a result of meeting the right person at the right time. So if you think about everything, your wife, your kids, your business, your experiences, you meet your beliefs, you meet the right person at the right time. And that opens up a whole new world. So I decided I was going to intentionally go out and meet new people that were in a world that I was not in. It's astounding in a year and a half what's been created through these new relationships that I've built.
What is the qualifier? How did you choose to grow into next level?
Yeah. Network? So for me, the qualifier, this is for me, it's going to be different for everybody. But for me, I needed to get into new networks of people so I was looking for people that had large circles of influence, that were well respected with what they do. So in other words, they had credibility with their community, and there were people that trusted them, lots of people. Like when I say lots of people, I mean, I was looking for people that had tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of followers. You might, I don't like to use the word influencer, because that conjures up an image of a girl on TikTok doing dances, for her influencer status. That's not what I'm talking about. Like, for example, Jay and Corey Fassett, they are They're joint venture experts, and they're a young couple. They're really fun. I got introduced to them because I stated my intention to a friend, and they introduced me to them. And I've gone to a couple of their retreats, and I've been on marketing cruises with them, and we've gotten to become very close friends. But they've got literally thousands of people that look up to them as joint venture experts. And I thought, if Jay and Corey and myself partnered up, I could help them and they could help me. Because our business tool is something that they could really benefit from. And if they trusted me and we built a relationship, then they would open their community to me. And they have. And they've introduced me to some amazing people on these cruises and on these retreats. I'm going to a retreat in Cabo in September with Jay and Corey, and there's going to be 40 people there. Combined, these 40 people probably have connections with 2 million people. Oh. And these are 40 people of which I'll probably know 5 of them. And so that's a whole bunch of new relationships. And again, my objective is not to sell them. My objective is it's not even necessarily to collaborate with them or joint venture with them. My objective is to get to know them. My objective is to learn about them and find out if there's anything I can do to serve them. And then we become friends. If it makes sense. I won't become friends with all of them, but there's certain ones I will become friends with. And then there may be opportunities for us to do some business together, but the main objective is relationship. It's building the relationship. That's where my main focus is, on building relationship with people that are in a world that I have never been in. And the joint venture world is one of those. So I've got other partners, one woman that's a financial coach, and she's written 25 books. Have you heard of Laurel Langmeyer? Laurel Langmeyer. She's got 5 New York Times best-selling books. She used to work for Robert Kiyosaki. And same thing. I've used our card system to open the doors. What you were talking about earlier, I sent her. This is a woman that has been on every major news station. She's been on lots of talk shows. She runs seminars. Her community pays $35,000 to be coached by her for a year, in a group. And I started sending her cards and gifts and complimenting her, and we built a relationship. We got together, and now I'm in business with her. So she has me on her stages, speaking on her stages, and I travel all over with her. But it's building those strong relationships with key people. And that's just what I chose to do. It's not for your listeners. That may not be the direction your listeners want to go, but the concept is the same. It's like wherever you are, you're stuck. Wherever you are, you get to a point where you're like comfortable. Whether you might be making $60,000 a year and you're comfortable at $60,000 a year, but there's a new level. There's another level that will provide you with a bigger vision for your life, a bigger purpose in life. And it's out there, but it's just like the hummingbird. You might not see it. You mentioned, Velko, it's a blind spot. What is there out there that you can't see because you're not looking in that direction?
What are some good advices that you would give our viewers based on your experience with life and achieving universal success? Everyone wants to be able to control their time and to live off of passive residual income. Obviously, you've mentioned that the reason why some people don't is because they quit too early. But what are some practical advices, since we're getting to the 1 hour mark and we have to wrap it up? Give us your maybe top 3 or top 5 advices in life to achieve freedom of the spirit, freedom of the soul, freedom of the body, freedom of the mind, and financial freedom.
Well, I've got a few things there. The first would be always be looking to give without expecting anything in return. And this is something especially business people miss, and you experience it every day by the people you do business with. So look for ways you can serve other people without expecting to get anything back. And do that if you look at the most successful people in business and also the happiest people in business. That's what they do. They're looking for ways to give without expecting anything in return. That would be one thing. The second thing that comes to mind is financially. I read a book called The Richest Man in Babylon when I was younger, and it talks about making sure to pay yourself first. And I'd read that book multiple times, and on your journey to whatever your Mecca is, whatever your journey is, wherever you're going, as you become more successful, there will be more and more people that will come to you wanting your money. They want you to invest in things. They want you to, like, if you look at football players and very successful rock stars, they usually, at a very young age, a lot of them go broke. And the reason they go broke is because all these people come to them with ideas and investment ideas, and they invest all their money and then lose it all because they didn't do what they said, what the richest man in Babylon talks about. And so I lost, of the first $8 million I made, I paid my taxes, lived on $4 million and paid taxes on it. And then I had about $4 million to invest. And when you start making money, you think you're smart, and you're not about that stuff, but you think you are. So you're like 40 grand here, $250,000 here, 100,000 here, 20,000 there. And then you look back years later and it's like, it's all gone. This is what happens to athletes all the time, professional athletes.
What is a good strategy to pay yourself first? Like, do you put the money in a checking account, or how do you?
Yeah, I put, this is going to sound crazy for some of you, but some of you will get it. I put it into life insurance, cash value. So there's actually a strategy of being your own bank. It's a strategy of being your own bank where you actually build cash value in life insurance. Life insurance is a very stable, secure investment vehicle, probably more stable than the banks. So rather than putting it in the bank, I do that. And I pay myself there. I mean, I send thousands of dollars a month to my life insurance, and it's building up cash value. And then I can borrow against it tax-free. And then what happens is, if something happens to me, my death benefit will pay back the loans. But you borrow against it and you go off and do things, you can invest in stuff. Like I just bought 44 acres in Tennessee with borrowed money from my life insurance, and then I refinanced the acreage and paid back the life insurance, but now I own the land.
Yeah.
So things like that. There's little strategies like that. But the message that I was trying to leave everybody with is, as far as paying yourself first, take 10% of every dollar you make. If you make $100, pay $10. If you make $1,000, pay $100. If you make $10,000, pay $1,000. Put it somewhere where you won't ever touch it. Just leave it in there forever.
From the gross amount?
From the gross amount. And I'll tell you something. If I had done that, Velko, in my first $4 million, I would have an additional $20 million. But I lost it all because I was investing in all these venture startup things, you know, and a nightclub and a restaurant and a movie and all the real estate partnerships. And it went away, gone, vaporized. Everything, which usually happens in startups, tech startups. The likelihood you're going to blow it out of, hit it out of the park is really low. But if you take 10% and put it away, you can lose the other money. You're still good, right? So anyway, that would be one, another one, and then the third one I want to mention is the importance of your morning routine and making sure and starting your day right. So and this is stuff that I've learned, and I tried it, and it's been made such a huge difference for me. I lost 35 pounds. I gave up wheat and wheat flour and bread and refined sugar. And I feel healthier than I have in many, many years. I lost a bunch of weight. But every single morning when my feet hit the ground, the minute my feet hit the ground, I drink 2 big glasses of fresh water.
Yeah.
And I do that every single day. And then are you familiar with Wim Hof? Yeah,
the ice bath.
I do his breathing every day. I take 12 minutes, 15 minutes, and I follow its guided meditation breathing. So it's a breathing technique, which really just fills your cells with oxygen, at a level that you don't do just throughout the course of your normal day. So I do the breathing, I drink the water, I get a workout, and I don't start my day until 11 a.m. I start my business day at 11 a.m. The first part of my morning is prayer, water, breathing, and exercise every morning, 100%, 7 days a week. And if you've got a family, you've got to make time for your family. What's that?
The cold plunge or no?
You know what? I don't. I've done the cold showers, but I haven't done the cold plunge. No, but I think it's good. I think it's a great thing.
It is.
Yeah.
Well, Jordan, What an amazing conversation. What an exciting life. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for sharing your...
You're a great interviewer, man. You're a great interviewer.
Thank you. We're going to definitely have you again
Thank you.
in a while. But it's such a pleasure to be in your circle and to be able to learn from you. And I know that we share the same passion for send out cards.
Yeah.
So it's an amazing product, amazing service, and we both recommend it, endorse it.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for this interview. We'll see you again.
My pleasure. Well, I really appreciate it. It's been great.